This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com.
Welcome back to Soups On. Today I'm going to show you one of my husband's favorite soups, although he says all my soups are his favorite. But this is my mushroom barley soup. So the first thing I do is I get 2 pounds of stew meat and I have it cut into about like 1.5 inch size cubes. And then I want to get my big stock pot and I put 2 or 3 tablespoons of olive oil in, and I've got the heat on medium high. And once that oil gets really hot, then I go ahead and I put my stew meat in there, and we're going to start browning that off. Now, as the meat starts to brown, you just kind of want to move it around in the pan a little bit. This is going to take maybe about 10 minutes or so. So at that time, I like to go ahead and start getting my veggies prepared while the meat's browning. I want to go ahead and get about a pound of carrots. That ends up being about 8 carrots. And I peel them, and then I go ahead and I cut them into fairly thick rounds, maybe about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. I don't want them to be too thin so that as they're cooking they disintegrate. I want you to be able to see them in the soup, but you do want to have them about the same diameter and thickness so that they cook fairly evenly. Now, because the veggies are all going into the pot at once, I just get a big bowl, and as I get them prepared, I just put them right in that. So once the carrots are done, I like to get some celery, and I use about 8 stalks of celery. So 8 carrots, 8 stalks of celery, and again, just go through and chop it up. Really not much differently than the carrots. You again want to have it in about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch thickness. And then once I get the celery all cut up, I just add it to the bowl with the carrots. Then it's time to get out a couple of onions. And since I'm dicing onions, I put on my onion goggles. And I'm using little yellow onions here, but you can use whatever you've got on hand. And we just want to begin dicing those up into sort of a medium-sized dice. And then we're going to add that to the bowl with the rest of the veggies. Now, when I'm making soup, I find it's really handy just to get all the vegetables prepared at once. And then that way, when the meat gets nicely browned like this, everything is ready to go. So, before I put the veggies in, though, I do want to season the meat a little bit. I season as I go with soup, and so I'm going to put in a little bit of kosher salt and a few cracks of black pepper, and I'll do that a few times during the cooking process. And then once I get the salt and pepper stirred in, then it's time to just go ahead and dump all the onions, carrots, and celery into the stock pot. Then I'm just going to go ahead and give those all a big stir. I'm basically going to cook this for about 10 minutes as well. I want everything to start to soften just a little bit. And then after the 10 minutes, we're going to put in the mushrooms. Now, I'm using some sliced brown mushrooms, but you can use whatever kind of mushrooms you'd like. But I like to put in about 20 ounces, between 20 and 24 ounces, whatever size bags or boxes you can get is great. Now, for the mushrooms, we do want to get them starting to cook a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and let them hang out with the meat and the veggies for about 5 minutes, and they will start to brown off. Then I'm going to add 1/4 cup of tomato paste. And this tomato paste really gives that kind of rich flavor to our stock. And then with that, 2 teaspoons of ground thyme. Now, normally I like to cook with fresh herbs, but for this soup, for some reason, the dried ground thyme works really, really good. The flavor just kind of permeates the whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a couple of minutes and really stir that tomato paste and the thyme in. it's not, the paste doesn't immediately want to melt in, but I want it to really kind of get dispersed throughout everything. So take a minute and do that. And then I'm going to put in 2 bay leaves. Boy, if you make soups, you really need a little bay tree in your yard. And then I'm going to add 4 cups of beef broth. And then I'm going to add 10 cups of water. Now that seems like a lot of water, but barley really soaks up a lot of liquid. So I use the water for that. And then basically I turn the oven or the stove up to high because I want to bring this all to a boil. That's a lot of liquid. And I can't put the barley in until I really get this boiling. So just kind of keep an eye on it, give it a little stir, and then pretty soon, maybe in about 4 or 5 minutes, you're going to start to get the boil. Then I'm going to go ahead and add 2 cups of pearl barley, and I'm going to go ahead and stir that in. And because that liquid is so hot and boiling, once I stir the barley in, I can immediately turn the heat down to low, put a lid on the stock pot, and then basically let it go for an hour. You could really let this soup go for 2 hours if you need to. So this soup is ready to serve. Look at how great the veggies have held their shape. You can still see the carrots and the celery and the mushroom and the barley and the meat. I really like that about this soup. And of course, because you've got the grain and the meat in there, it just is really hearty. You only need to really serve it with a big piece of crusty bread, and it's fantastic. Now there's a couple things I wanted to tell you about this soup. If you didn't need quite as large a pot of soup as the recipe calls for, you can easily cut it in half. Just use a pound of meat, 4 carrots, 4 celery, that kind of a thing. But this soup freezes great. So if you did indeed have leftovers, just put it in some freezer containers, and then you can be having some nice soup for many months to come. Well, as always, if you'd like to give this mushroom barley soup a try, go to our website, visit the Soups On show notes, and I'll have the recipe there for you. And if you've got a question, please feel free to email me. I'll see you next time.